Hello, welcome to European Open Briefing for Monday, September the 24th. I'm Rafi Verjan, currency analyst at xm.com, and we're going to be having a look at what's happening in the currency markets today. So there's a bit of risk-off sentiment this morning. This comes after China cancelled planned trade talks with the United States, which were due to be held this week. So this has raised concerns that the trade war between the US and China will be a very protracted one. Last week we saw a strong rebound in risk appetite as the tariffs raised by both the US and China on each other's goods weren't as high as had been initially feared. So that had led to some hopes that the two sides remain open to talks. But we're seeing a slight reversal of those trades this morning. The dollar index is slightly firmer, currently at around 94.28 against the yen. The dollar was down earlier this morning, but it's now risen against its Japanese counterpart, currently trading around 112.58. We're also seeing European currencies also move higher. The euro is more or less flat around 1.1748, and sterling, it has managed to crawl above the 1.31 level after that big tumble at the end of last week. But there's likely to be caution for both currencies this week. We've got the Italian budget due to be announced on September the 27th. If that budget deficit is in breach of EU rules, we could see the EU falling if we see a spike in Italian government bond yields. Regarding sterling, we've got the UK Conservative Party conference at the end of the month, and UK Prime Minister Theresa May is under pressure to come up with a plan B following the impasse at the EU summit last week in the Brexit negotiations. If we look at the risk-sensitive currencies, the Aussie and the Kiwi both slightly lower in tune with the market mood. The Aussie is currently around 0.7273. The Kiwi is slightly down at 0.6676. We do have the Reserve Bank of New Zealand policy meeting coming up later this week, so that will remain in focus for the New Zealand dollar. If you look at the Canadian dollar, it's also slightly lower, currently around 1.2933 against its US counterpart. We're seeing the NAFTA talks having stalled after some progress in recent weeks. There's still no sign that the two sides are nearing an agreement, and that's weighing on the loonie, despite the fact that on Friday there was pretty strong inflation numbers out of Canada. And looking at commodities, we can see gold prices slightly lower on the back of a slightly firmer US dollar, but oil prices, we can see they're up sharply. WTI crude, the biggest gainer in terms of the major commodities and currencies this morning, up by 1.7%. That comes after OPEC and non-OPEC countries refused to increase output at a meeting over the weekend in defiance of President Trump, who had asked OPEC members to raise output in order to reduce pressure on prices. Let's have a look at now the dollar index, which has fallen to 2.5 months lows last week. It has recovered slightly, but we can see it's overall it does remain in a downtrend. So the fact that China has cancelled planned trade talks with the US, that is weighing on risk sentiment at the start of the week. But the fact that many Asian markets are closed this morning for a holiday, there is thin liquidity, and therefore we're seeing many market players out of the market this morning. So for the time being, market reaction is fairly muted. There was a further deterioration in the relations between the US and China after the US imposed sanctions on a Chinese military agency for purchasing military equipment from Russia, which the US wasn't happy about. So that further infuriated Chinese officials. So now it's looking unlikely that there will be any talks between the two sides in the near future. But on the other hand, China, there are hopes that the Chinese stimulus stimulus policies for its economy, which will likely be boosting growth. So that's somewhat limiting the risk of mood. And also the Federal Reserve, which concludes its two-day policy meeting on Wednesday, is expected to raise interest rates, and that is supporting the US dollar. So even if we do see a rebound in risk appetite later on, the US dollar will likely remain well supported. Quick look at the pound. We can see it had rallied to a 10-week high last week of 1.3297 before slumping to below the 1.31 level after the UK and EU failed to make any progress on the sticky issue of the Northern Irish border. The two sides have accused each other of being uncompromising, but UK Prime Minister Theresa May is under pressure to come up with a plan B, as the Chequers plan is failing to win support from either the EU or within members of her own party. And we've got that Conservative Party conference coming up on September the 30th, and there's likely to be plenty of headlines either related to Brexit negotiations itself or regarding Theresa May's leadership, and we're likely to see quite a bit of volatility for sterling during the coming days. And finally, having a look at what's happening in oil prices, we can see WTI today jumping to a 2.5 months high of $72.16 a barrel. So that's the highest since early July. Brent crude has also rallied. It hit a 4-month peak of $80.47 a barrel. This comes after OPEC said they're not planning on raising output despite the request by President Trump. Saudi Arabia has said that there are no signs of supply shortages, so no need to increase output. It's going to be fairly quiet for the rest of the day, apart from ECB President Mario Draghi testifying before the European Parliament at 13 hours GMT. That's it from me. Thank you very much for watching, and have a great day.